So about 1 in 5 adults face trauma in the workplace. Now, when people face any kind of trauma, they're usually affected in most areas of their life. But a lot of the time, people are too scared to heal from it. They're too scared to do anything about it because people think they need to relive it in order to heal from it. And this is my talk about. So welcome to how to help any client heal from trauma without regression. My name is Conny AHC. I'm a hypnotherapist. I'm an international speaker. I'm also an author. And I specialize in anxiety and in trauma relief. And I'm extremely passionate about healing from trauma without regression. Now, there's a reason why I'm so passionate about it. As a little girl, I experienced trauma myself. And that affected me in most areas of my life. I had no friends. I had no self-belief. I was shy. I couldn't talk to people. I was always alone. I had no self-love. And on top of that, I was suffering from anxiety. So life for me was a struggle. Life for me was just getting by day. And of course, that's not how I wanted to live life, especially in my teenage years. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to have friends. I wanted to be happy. I just didn't know how I would ever be able to get there. Failed and re-traumatized by the traditional therapy approach, I felt more hopeless than ever. I did try many other things. I did breathing and self-help books and meditation and all the way up to medication. And yeah, some of the things made me feel better, but nothing gave me that long-term relief that I really needed. So I just kept surviving for many years until I got to a point where I didn't want to live like that anymore. At that time, my firstborn was a year old, and the anxiety had overtaken my life. I used to wake up nearly every night having a panic attack. Then I would be awake for hours. And then in the morning, the 1-year-old wakes up. I'm exhausted. I've got no patience, and I'm never present. So I wasn't the best mom, as you can imagine. And my daughter was my biggest motivator to do something about it. So I decided to try something completely different, and I decided to try hypnotherapy. It was almost like how most of our clients are, my last resort. But I didn't want to give up yet. I really wanted to do that for my daughter. So I tried hypnotherapy, and within weeks, the anxiety got less. And within months, I had no more panic attacks. And that was such a life-changing experience for me, that something that was such a big problem for me, I was suddenly able to overcome. So much so that I decided to change my career. I actually got a law degree, but I went then into hypnotherapy. And I wanted to become a hypnotherapist. But I still had that unresolved trauma that was affecting me in most areas of my life. I had overcome the anxiety, but I still had all these other issues. But what happened to me was I came from the traditional therapy approach, and I didn't want to talk about it over and over again. And at that time, I believed that that's the only way to heal from it. But I also knew that in order to become a hypnotherapist, I had to heal myself first. I had to overcome the effects of the trauma first, because I had no self-belief. I couldn't talk to people. I had a fear of public speaking. I was too scared to see clients. I had a fear of being seen and being heard. So of course, I couldn't work as a hypnotherapist like that. And that's when I decided to search and find a better and easier way to overcome trauma. So I've put everything that I've learned, everything that I've experienced, everything that I felt like was lacking when I was going through therapy in my 5-step SHINE trauma release process. And it is a combination of a modern and traditional hypnotic approach, NLP, EFT, and the neuroscience of the brain, which is what I specialize in. And in this presentation today, I am going to share 3 key points with you. So I'm going to talk about what's the neuroscientific reason behind healing from past experiences without regression. I'm going to share with you the direct applications with your clients so that you can implement that straight away without having to learn any new process or anything, with what you already know. And then third, I'm going to share with you my 5-step SHINE trauma relief program. Now, as many of you have seen, I've just published my book. And this book is about a specific client that I've taken through the SHINE trauma release process. And in this presentation, I am going to reference back to that client. So when I tell you certain examples of how I've worked, I'm going to reference back to that specific client and how I've helped her. And my goal is that by the end, you guys can all implement something with your next client. You can all tweak something and maybe use that with your next client. Now I've handed through some email lists. If you give me an email address, I am going to give you the PowerPoint and some notes from this presentation. I'm not going to spam you. You're not on my email list because of that. You're just going to get simply that. And there's a link if you're interested in some training, but that's it. You're not going to get any more emails from me. This is just really so you can have that PowerPoint. So let's jump into key point number 2. What is the neuroscientific reason to heal without regression? How and why is this even possible? So first, we need to look at trauma. Now, trauma, we all know, can happen at any time in our life. People experience childhood trauma, teenage years, adulthood, or whatever it may be. People can experience big trauma, such as abuse, rape, or small trauma, maybe a breakup or a loss of a job. Even if this is something that happened last week, last year, last month, 10 years ago, the same approach can be used. When we look at trauma, now some people experience trauma out of one incident. That's one traumatic experience, and that affects them. Other people have prolonged exposure to trauma. So that could be ongoing abuse or ongoing neglect. And then there's something called secondary trauma, which a lot of my clients come and see me because of that. So a secondary trauma means the client hasn't experienced the trauma themselves, but they have somehow witnessed it, and they're still affected by it. And I had a client just recently come, and she was 25, and what happened to her was that she was getting triggered by slamming of the door and loud noises. And she was sitting in this office building, and that happened quite frequently. And every time it happened, she had a panic attack. Now, what happened to her in her childhood? Her parents had an extremely violent relationship with each other. And she would sit in the bedroom as a little child, and she would hear them yelling, slamming of the doors, throwing stuff at each other. And although they never laid a hand on her, no one was ever violent with her, she was still affected at the age of 25 with that. So that's also a key point, that people sometimes just suffer from the effects. And then we also need to look at that, what I classify as trauma, you might not classify as trauma. One person says a breakup in a relationship is a traumatic experience. Another person wouldn't classify that as trauma. And then we also have the effects of trauma. So sometimes people have a traumatic experience and the effects surface straight away. And then it's really easy to link it and be like, all right, I'm feeling like that because of the trauma that I experienced. But then there's also something which is called a delayed onset. That sometimes the effects of the trauma can happen a year later. And then people don't link it to the trauma. And that happened to me. So at the age of 25, I got really, really sick at early stages of cancer. And that was always a scary experience at that young age. And I had a year of surgeries and a year of treatment, and I was fine. I was healthy again. And then the anxiety started, the panic attacks, fear of doctors, health anxiety, crazy. At that time, I didn't know anything about this. And I never linked it to that because in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm healthy. And everyone told me, oh, you're so lucky, you're healthy again. Look at you, you're so lucky. And I'm like, yeah, I should be lucky. Actually, I'm healthy again. But I didn't feel like that. It was still affecting me. And then you also have the group of people that come and say, you know what, I had an amazing childhood. I didn't get raped. I didn't get neglected. I had nothing traumatic happen to me, but I still kind of feel held back by it. And we all know that just a birth of a sibling or parents' divorce or maybe parents working a lot and not having a lot of quality time doesn't sound traumatic to us. But for that little one, it can be traumatic. And our childhood shapes the way we view the world as an adult, whether something traumatic or something or nothing traumatic happens. And then we have the final group of people, those clients that come and see me and they say, you know what? I have this unexplained fear. I don't know why I'm getting triggered when this or this happens. Now, people might have no memory of something because they were that little. Maybe they have a repressed memory and they dissociated from it. So let's say someone comes and says, I have this unexplained fear of dogs. Every time I see a dog, I start getting in that panic attack and my heart starts rushing. And let's say they got bitten by a dog when they were really little, and their parents haven't told them about it. The brain still remembers that and gets triggered every time they see the dog. Now, consciously, they don't know they got bitten by a dog, and they can't explain that fear. So as I said, I'm going to reference to that client. So this client, Victoria, she had experienced abuse at her workplace. She experienced grooming and assault. Now, that's all I know about it. This whole time when I worked with her, and even writing the book, and she also wrote a chapter in the book, I never found out any more details about it, which is the beautiful thing about this process, that we don't need to know any details about the event. So all I know, grooming, assault, what I do know is how it affected her. So the effects that she had was PTSD, depression, major anxiety, too scared to leave the house, all the way to suicidal ideation, night terrors to agoraphobia. So those were the effects from the trauma. That's what she come and see me for. And basically what happened is, when she come and see me, she was like, there's certain appointments that are going to come up in a couple of weeks that she needs to attend in person. Because by then, she had avoided all in-person appointments. It was Corona at the time, so she was also quite happy because everything was done with telehealth. But then a few appointments came up where she had to show up in person, and they were really important for her financial future. And she was like, I can't go to those appointments. At that time, she had been in the traditional approach about 4 years. So she's been with doctors, psychs, medication. And her words to me were that she was dreading her appointments because she felt like she's just done the same. She's talked about it a lot. And she didn't really want to talk about it over and over again. She kind of lost all hope. But she needed to attend those appointments. So that's when she approached me. So when we look at the people that we just talked about, we have people that have experienced trauma and they're too scared to go back and relive it. We have people that have experienced trauma like Victoria and have talked about it and are sick of it. Then we have those people that had no trauma or they had an unknown trauma. How can we help them all? How can we help all of those groups? And in that case, regression might not always be the best approach because people don't want to go back. People don't know what it is. People don't know the root of their problem. And this is where the therapeutic memory reconsolidation comes into play. This is the neuroscientific reason how we can heal without regression. So therapeutic memory reconsolidation means we are activating the memory. It gets out of that stuck consolidated state, and the elements of that memory become malleable. And what we can do then, we can change the emotional track of that memory. We can change the implicit learning of that memory. And in order to understand that, we need to first understand what memory is. Because a lot of people think that memory is a recorded movie of an event. It's a recorded movie and then I replay it in my head. But memory is really something different. Memory is a creative process. So when I recall a memory, what the brain does, it pulls out of all these parts of the brain and recreates that memory. And when it recreates that memory, it becomes malleable. So our memory usually changes every single time we recall it. So it gets out of that stuck, consolidated state. We recall it. It becomes malleable. And then we are putting in new information. What do I mean by new information? So that could be a change in perspective. So let's say the trauma that I experienced, now I've healed from it, I've overcome, I've read the book about it. When I now talk about the childhood memory, I have a growth, I have a learning, I have a different perspective. So when I recall that memory, that's going to influence my memory. Or it could be that I'm telling you about a childhood memory, and then you say, I don't know, I have a client that something similar happened to my client, and you tell me that story. I might take a little bit of the client's story into my own memory. Or I might even talk to my brother and say, do you remember when that happened? And he's going to be like, that's not happened like that. It happened totally different. And then I might be like, maybe he's right. So then I start putting his information in. And then it gets reconsolidated back in. But the thing is that the changes are so subtle that you don't realize it. And that's when everyone believes that their memory is the real memory. I mean, how many times I'm sure you've all got siblings or partners or that you've spoken to about an event and you have a completely different memory of that event. And everyone thinks, oh, nah, mine's right. You remembered completely wrong. And that's the reason why. And when we think of an early childhood memory, and I love the way Melissa Tiers explains it. So Melissa Tiers says a childhood memory is like a Word document. So when I have a Word document and I change one word in the document and I save it, I only ever have access to the latest version of that document. So when we are now thinking of a childhood memory, it's contaminated by all of those years we talked about it, we thought about it, all of those years where other people told us something about it, and by our own growth and learning. And this is, in that case, that the memory is malleable, we can use that to our advantage in the therapeutic approach. So let's say Victoria, she came to me because she had the event, but what are the effects of the event? She had extreme anxiety. Now, she had panic attacks and anxiety every time she had to leave the house. She lost all contact to the outside world. As I said, she wanted to live again, but her main concern was those appointments that she had to face in a couple of weeks. Now, of course, she comes and sees me, and I could regress her back to the grooming and assault. I could regress her back to the initial sensitizing event. Or I can work with the effect. So I can work with the anxiety, and I can use a memory of a recent time where that has happened to her. So I could say to her, okay, tell me the last time you left the house and you had a panic attack or you felt anxious. And what happens then is with a therapeutic memory reconsolidation, when I activate that memory and I say to her, okay, tell me, and let's say she says the last time she had to go to the pharmacy in person, she had to pick something up. That's when she had a panic attack. So I access that neural network and I find out when was the last time she felt like that. And then I put in new information. I put in a different feeling. So I would say to her, okay, well, last time you went to the pharmacy and you had a panic attack, how would you like to feel instead? Maybe she says calm. Okay, tell me what feels calm. Where do you feel it? And what else? And then maybe all the way up to confident, okay? And once she can imagine herself going to that pharmacy, feeling confident, that's what creates in the brain something called a prediction error, a mismatch in the brain, because the brain is predicting anxiety every time she leaves the house. So the brain is predicting anxiety when she goes to that pharmacy. But when the brain is not getting that, it has to update that memory. And I'm going to talk about the specific steps of the therapeutic memory reconsolidation in a moment. But what happens is, when that prediction error happens in the brain, this then ripples back through the entire neural network. So it will get the initial sensitizing event, that abuse at her workplace. It will get all the limiting beliefs that are linked to it because, of course, she lost all confidence in herself. It will get the behavior. So at the end of the day, it will get everything that's linked to that neural network when we only change one piece of that gestalt. So we just need to change one piece and it affects that whole neural network. So in that case, when she came and saw me, I would not regress her back. When she's told me she's been in a traditional approach, she has to go to some appointments in a couple of weeks, I would not regress her back. I use that approach because once she starts taking control, once she starts feeling better about herself, it changes everything. It changes how she feels. It changes how she views the world. It changes how she thinks her own abilities are. And even more important, it changes how safe she feels in that world. And this trickles all the way down. And it's not going to change the event, but it takes the fire away from that event. It takes all of those triggers away from that event. Now, the steps of the therapeutic memory reconsolidation are 3 to 4 steps. And I explain in a moment why I say that. I say 4 steps, but really 3 steps are the key ones. So number 1 is we have to activate the memory. So in other words, we have to access the neural network of the problem. When we've accessed that neural network, they say we have about a 4 to 5 hour window to override that neural pathway. Step 2 is neutralize the memory, and I'll explain each step in detail. Step 3 is the prediction error that I was talking about, and then step 4 is linking it in. So step 1 is to activate the memory, meaning we have to access the neural network of the problem. Now, the way we do it, we need to recall a specific memory or a specific experience the client felt like that. Now, it doesn't, as I said, it doesn't have to be the trauma event. It doesn't have to be the initial sensitizing event. It can be any subsequent event, any other time where she felt anxiety or panic attacks, any other times where she felt those effects happening. Now, the key thing is we cannot talk in general. So, of course, the first thing she said to me was, I always feel like that. I always feel anxious at home. I feel anxious when I have to leave the house. I feel anxious when I have to check my letterbox. And I'm like, okay, I understand that you always feel like that, but tell me one specific time. Because when we talk generalized about it, we almost like dissociate it from it a bit. We're not lighting up that neural network of the problem. So I say, oh, I understand you always feel like that, but just tell me one specific time you felt like that. That's how we get the client to access the neural network of the problem. And it doesn't matter what we're working with. If that's overeating, if that's lack of confidence or a belief coming up, we just need to find out from the client a specific time they felt like that. And we need the client to get to trigger that emotional and nervous system response. And we can see that in our clients when they start talking about it. And let's say she starts talking about the pharmacy, and then she maybe starts talking a bit faster or looks around. You can see that in your client when they start feeling it. And then, as we said, we have the 4 to 5 hour window to override it. Now, step 2 is neutralize it. So really, this step is not necessary for the therapeutic memory reconsolidation. But the reason why I do it with my clients is because it's a lot easier for the client to first neutralize that feeling, that nervous system response, and then go into a positive feeling. To go from that anxious feeling now to feeling calm and in control might be a big step for a client. So I always neutralize that feeling. Now, we can do it with different processes. It could be I don't know if you guys know the bilateral stimulation, or it could be tapping, or as she's talking and telling me about the experience, I could just say to her, stop, stand up and shake. Break state, in other words. And then it's a lot easier to create that positive feeling. And then step number 3 is that prediction error. And the prediction error is really the key element for the therapeutic memory reconsolidation. So what we need to put in, a different emotion, a different belief, or a different understanding. Anything that forces the brain to update. Because what does our brain do? Our brain operates on predictions. So what our brain does, our brain predicts what happens next based on past experiences. So her brain is predicting that every time she leaves the house, she's going to feel anxious. Every time she leaves the house, she's going to have a panic attack. That's the prediction of the brain. Now, when she suddenly leaves the house and she feels calm or confident or whatever it may be, that creates a prediction error in the brain, and the brain has to update this with the new information. Now, the updating of the new information and that mechanism in our brain is for survival. Because if you think of caveman times, and they always go down to the same spot in the river to collect berries, and then suddenly there's wild animals there, they have to update that memory, that it's not safe to go down there anymore. And that's the key element. So we need to just create something that the brain is not predicting, that something different is going to happen. And then the final one is linking it in. So we need to link that new feeling, that new belief, whatever it may be, and we need to first link it in with that memory that we used for the activation. So if she, for example, says, okay, the pharmacy example, then I say to her, okay, so now see yourself going to the pharmacy feeling confident. Where do you feel it in your body? Now see yourself going to the pharmacies and handing in the script or whatever it may be. And we're just linking it in. We're starting first with that first memory, and then we're going to link it in her whole life. Okay, so now you're confident going to the pharmacy. Where else are you going to be confident now? She might go, I don't know, grocery shopping. Oh, now your doctor's appointment. All the way to, now see yourself going to those appointments in 3 weeks' time. That's so important, the financial appointments. And you're going there confident now. So we're linking and looping in it over and over again, all the way to, as I said, creating that future memory. Now, before I go more into the therapeutic memory reconsolidation and how we can create that in the session, does anyone have any questions, or is everything clear so far? I know it's a lot of information. I hope I'm explaining it. But it will make more sense as well now that I'm telling you the details. So let's talk about how you can do that with your client. How can you create that with your clients? And I'm going to talk about how can you create that with your clients without any hypnotic process, without anything doing crazy, just by making use out of every minute that you have with your clients. So a lot of the things you might already be doing subconsciously. I mean, I have done a lot of those things before I understood the therapeutic memory reconsolidation. There was things that I just did that way. And we had a conversation where it's like, did I just do it that way because I learned it? And someone taught me to do it that way and I just copied it? Maybe there's some intuition. But what happened was when I understood the therapeutic memory reconsolidation, when I started tweaking the order of how I was doing my sessions, and I started doing it with intention because I understand now why I'm doing something, the results for my clients got even better. And that's what I want to share with you, how you can create this. So there's two ways. Number one, when I'm going to talk about the shine trauma process, each process that I've created has those 4 steps underneath it. That's one thing. But the other thing is that I'm using the whole sessions with my clients from the moment we start the conversation. I am creating the first therapeutic memory reconsolidation. And as Justine was explaining, the hypnosis part is often just the ritual part. It's just the ceremonial part. I create that change before that, but I'm a hypnotherapist. They want to be hypnotized. Really, the hypnosis cements it in and it creates a lot of change. But the way I do it, I'm already getting the change before I do any hypnosis. Because I want to make use out of every minute with my clients. So how can we create it in every session? Number one is we need to light up the neural network of the problem. So as we said earlier, we need to activate the memory right at the beginning of the session. Because what happens is when that memory is activated, everything I'm talking in the session falls into the 4 to 5 hour window. So rather than what I used to do before, is more maybe talking general about anxiety and what's going on for them, I straight away is like, okay, cool, understand, but tell me a specific time you felt like that. Straight away. I do that in the first 2 or 3 minutes. I'm like, just explain it to me. When was the last time you felt like that? And as I said, whether you do it with anxiety or when was the last time that belief came up for you? When was the last time that belief stopped you? Or when was the last time you were binge eating? It doesn't matter, but instead of talking in general, I straight away open that neural network of the problem. Then the second thing is I create the first prediction error just through education. And then at the end, I link it in with an action they have to do. So let's talk about it. At the beginning of the session, as I said, and Victoria is a good example for that, I said, okay, tell me the last time you felt anxious. Tell me the last time you had a panic attack. And I needed for her to access those emotions, those responses. Then the second thing is the education. So obviously we all know some form of education is really important because, you know, there's a lot of myths and misconceptions about certain areas or about certain topics. Now, when I talk about education, education could be about how trauma affects us, or education could be why what happens in our childhood affects us, or it could be the myths and misconceptions about anxiety, or maybe educations about beliefs. Now, I know most of us, I'm sure, educate your clients in some form or shape, and I used to always do it. But what I used to do is I used to do the education first, and then I went into, let's talk about the problem and let's work with that. But I lost valuable time because what happens is when we do the education right, we can already create that first prediction error in the brain. Now, I'll explain it in a second. So when we do the education in the right order, that the neural network is lit up, and now I'm going to educate my client, I can create the first chance of a prediction error, and I can already create the change within the first 5 minutes of the session. Now, when I say a prediction error, we can be really creative on how to create that. Yeah, a prediction error, as I said earlier, is just something that the brain is not predicting, something that forces the brain to update. And this time I'm going to actually give you my example. So I had this belief that anxiety was kind of part of my identity. I thought I was just always going to be anxious. That's just who I am. because everyone was telling me that in my environment. I was anxious for such a long time that people would just say, oh, that's who you are. You're always going to be anxious. You're just a worrywart. You just always worry. Now, somehow I picked up that belief that that's who I am. And when I overcome the anxiety and the panic attacks, I was still worrying a lot. I was still not a very calm person. I was still overthinking. I was always thinking about the worst outcome. But I, at that time, believed that that's the best I can achieve. Like not having daily panic attacks and not having anxiety stopping me from living my life, that's the best I can get, because anxiety is almost like one of my personality traits. I'm just one of those people that are always going to be anxious. And then I had a session with my mentor, who is an anxiety relief specialist. And I actually went to just learn from him. And he then said to me in the first session, he's like, let me talk about the common myths and misconceptions about anxiety. And he's like, did you know, and he didn't know what I was thinking, but he said to me, did you know that a lot of people think anxiety is part of their identity? I was like, oh, I'm one of them. And he taught me about the concept that anxiety is a learned habitual behavior. And that was key for me, because I think he could have done any crazy process on me. If I still believe that anxiety is a little bit a part of my identity, I would still be anxious probably. And it doesn't matter what process he does on me. So when we now look at the prediction error, so my old belief was anxiety is part of my identity and I'm always going to be someone that worries. Now suddenly that prediction error comes in through his education. Now he's an anxiety relief specialist. I believed what he told me and it made sense how he explained it to me. Now my new belief suddenly is, hey, it's a behavior. It's not an identity. Now a behavior can be changed. And that is enough to create a prediction error in the brain to actually get someone to have that huge shift without any process. So as I said, when we work with the prediction error, we can be really creative. It's whatever you specialize in, you know what you specialize in, you know more than your clients know. And I think we all know those common myths and misconceptions that our clients believe. And I listen to what my clients say. How do they talk about it? Do they say it's my anxiety? Do they talk about, oh, anxiety runs in my family? My grandma had it, my mom had it, I have it. When they say that, that's a big indication for me to be like, they could be believing that it runs in their bloodline. So then I talk about that myth, that anxiety, yes, is passed on, but it's passed on as a learned habitual behavior. So all of those things can create a prediction error. Now you can do it with whatever you're specializing in, because you know more than the client and you know what most people believe in those areas. And then the other key thing is, at the end of the session, I reinforce it. I create the step 4 of the therapeutic memory reconsolidation by linking it in and by getting them to do a task. Now, as we said earlier, we have the 4 to 5 hour window. So let's say I had an hour session. I get them to do a task within the first 3 hours of the end of our session, because then I know I'm still in that window. Now, what it does, it cements in the change, it links in the change, and it creates another layer of the therapeutic memory reconsolidation. Now, when I talk about the task, when I started doing that, that was a big game changer for my clients. So after each session, they have to do one task. Now, I don't tell them what they have to do. We work it out together. I don't say you have to do this. We work it out together. And besides the therapeutic memory reconsolidation, the second thing that I find with my clients is it creates evidence that what we're doing is working. And it's not just all talk. Because by the end, and I work with most of my clients 5 to 6 weeks, by the end of 5 or 6 weeks, they have 5, 6 tangible results, 5 things that they have achieved that they thought they could never achieve. Now, what it does, it shows them, wow, it's working. They have that reference point in their brain that it's working, and they tell it their environment, they tell their family, their friends, and all these people that maybe weren't so sure about hypnosis are suddenly, oh, wow, hypnosis might work. So, it brings on clients, and it also helps their environment to reinforce them as well and say, you know what, you're doing amazing. I can see the change in you, because it's good when you hear that from the people around you, that they also believe and that they can also see your change. I mean, I always provide my clients with that, but it's amazing when they can hear it from their own family members. So when I talk about that they have to do an action, it has to be something that is a little bit out of their comfort zone. Now, I don't want them to completely freak out, because then it's going to be the opposite effect. And that's why I don't tell them what to do. We work it out together. They have to send me a message that they've done it, which creates accountability. And what it does create, it creates excitement because they've just achieved something. It creates motivation for the rest of the work we're doing, and it creates belief. Now imagine a client has already done something after the first session. They're coming from the traditional approach where they feel like nothing has changed for years, and now after one session, I've done something. That's amazing for them, and that really sets them up for success for the rest of the work that we're doing. So with Victoria, week 1, her task was to go out the front and the backyard. Now, to us, that doesn't sound too crazy. For her, considering she's only checked her letterbox, so she's only walked down the driveway at nighttime and when it was dark, going out in daytime was huge. Having people walk past the fence, seeing other people again. So that was week 1. Then week 2, she decided to go grocery shopping because she hasn't done any grocery shopping in 7 years. She's only done online shopping. So she decided she wanted to go to Woolworth, which is a grocery store. But then again, I didn't send her out and say, hey, now go to Woolworth at the busiest time. We're like, okay, it's 5 o'clock now. We're like, let's keep it in the 3-hour window. 7 o'clock is a great time. It's not busy here. And she got a list. So she had to like buy 5 things. So I equipped her with being successful when she does that. And then week 3 was to attend those appointments that were really important to her. And week 4 was to get her glasses fixed at Specsavers, something she hadn't done in like years either. I did work with Victoria a lot longer. And we went from meeting on the beach where we actually took that photo. So I drove all the way down to the other side of Melbourne to meet her because the beach was a place she really wanted to go to, but she was too scared. She was too scared of driving as well. So I said, okay, I'll drive down to the other side of Melbourne. I knew she would drive there to meet me. So it was a bit of I knew that would get her motivated to get a little bit out of her comfort zone. And that's where we met at the beach. And, 7 years that she hasn't gone to the beach, although she lived 5 minutes away from the beach. So before I go into the shine trauma process, is there any questions? Or does that all make sense? What time is it? 20 minutes? Perfect. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Can you tell me why it's 4 to 5 hours window?
That's just a scientific way they've measured it. That's just what they come up with. That's the window. The memory is malleable. After that, it gets reconsolidated back in with that new information.
So is this what you've worked out? It's 4 to 5.
No, that's a scientific. That's what they. Yes, there's some scientific study. That's what they say. Yes, 100%. And one thing, sorry, yeah, let me just say one thing. Now, when we talk about the therapeutic memory reconsolidation, there's many ways of doing it. We can do it with a hypnotic process. We can do it just through conversation. We can do it with EFT. We can do it with tapping. There's so many ways of doing it. And so many of the approaches that we already are doing have those steps underneath it. But this was just a way of showing to you that you can do it without any process. And as I said, I am then afterwards doing the hypnosis, which I'm going to explain in those 5 steps, because I'm a hypnotherapist and that's what clients want to see.
Yes. How do you cement it in? So what do you do? Do you use an anchor to actually create that so it has that staying, or is it all strategy, task, etc.?
One thing is the action. And the second thing, which is letter E, empowerment, which I'll talk about in a moment, how I anchor that in. All good? Okay, so this is the shine trauma release process that I've created. Now, each letter in the process stands for an important step. So letter S, safe, is session 1. So in session 1, I create a safe space for my clients. And that was very important for Victoria because the only safe space she had was her bedroom and not talking to anyone. So I did have to work a bit to really make her feel safe and trust me. Now, in session 1 or in general, as I said earlier, the client can tell me as much or as little as they want about what they've experienced. If a client comes to me and they tell me they have been in the traditional approach, I try to keep it as short as possible because they've talked about it all the time. And sometimes they are conditioned to just talking about it. Now, if a client comes and says, you know what, I've actually never talked about the traumatic experience, like it's that black, dark secret, I want them to feel safe to open up, but they don't have to. I'm just creating a safe space. And if they eventually open up, which sometimes happens after a couple of sessions or in session 2, that's fine. But it's not necessary for them to really heal from it. But what I've found with all the clients I work with, they want to feel understood and they want to feel safe. Because a lot of the times our clients don't feel understood. And I can tell you that I went through the traditional approach and I saw therapist after therapist and I never felt understood. I never felt safe enough to really share how I've been feeling. So that's one of the key things that I want to create for my clients. Now, in session 1, we talk mainly about the effects. Okay, this happened, but how is it affecting you today? With Victoria was the anxiety and the panic attacks. That's what I'm interested in because that's what I want to change. I want to change how it's affecting them today. How is it stopping them in their life today? That's the key thing. Because when we can clear up the effects with the therapeutic memory reconsolidation, as we said, it can ripple back and it can change the whole entire network. And then it has that ripple effect. So when Victoria was finally able to get out of the house and attend her appointments, she started feeling more confident in all areas of her life. She started believing in herself more. So it wasn't just changing that she could attend those appointments. It changed her own abilities and what she thinks about herself. Now, in session 1, I do quite a short hypnosis with my clients. I don't do a very long one because I want to ease them into hypnosis. I want to reassure them because, people might come and say, oh, I don't know if I can visualize enough. I don't know if I can concentrate long enough. And they have all this chatter in their mind. And I'm like, don't worry, we'll just do a quick just experience what it feels like. But then what I do is I give my clients a hypnosis recording to listen to. So they listen to that recording for the next 7 days until our session. Now they can listen to it at night as they fall asleep. So everyone can do it, even the busiest person. But by the time I have session 2 with them, they're anchored to my voice. They feel safe with my voice. They've heard my words. They know what I say. And they go in hypnosis automatically without any of those worries. Can I go into hypnosis? So really, session 1 is creating rapport and trust, which we all know is the most important thing. And when I have that, that's the foundation for the rest of the work that I'm doing with them. And then session 2, the letter H, is healing. Now, one thing we can do with a therapeutic memory reconsolidation, we can rewrite the implicit learning. Do you guys know implicit and explicit learning and memories? So I'll explain it quickly. Now, an explicit memory is a conscious memory. So it's when I say to you, what did you have for dinner last night? What did you watch on TV last night? You have to recall it intentional. And then the opposite to that is our implicit memories. They're formed unconscious. They're formed without awareness and they're recalled unintentional. So they're usually triggered by certain stimuli. When we talk about the dog example, so every time that person sees the dog, it makes them feel anxious. Now, it's just a trigger in the brain. They see that dog, it lights up those neural networks and it makes them feel that way. Although the dog's not even a danger in that moment. Same with the lady with the smashing of the doors and yelling. She's sitting in her safe office space, and we all know a slamming of the door could be a wind. Doesn't have to be something dangerous, but her body and her brain were perceiving it as threat straight away. Now, what happens is those implicit memories can be formed very early on because they involve feelings. So to create an explicit memory, we need to have a certain age to have the capability in our brain. But implicit memories are already formed in utero because they involve feelings. That's how early those triggers can start happening. And we don't know because we don't know what happened when we're in when our mom was pregnant with us. So when we look at Victoria, we know the traumatic experience. What was her implicit learning? Her implicit learning was it's not safe to leave her house. That was the result out of the trauma. Now, all these subsequent events where she left the house and she had anxiety or panic attacks were just reinforcing that. And she even said to me, her house is like a castle and she can't even open the front door. Like she can't even walk outside. So Her solution was, it's not safe to go out, so I'm just not going out, which led all the way to her not leaving the house for so many years. Now, in session 2, with a therapeutic memory reconsolidation, I was able to rewrite that implicit learning for her to rebuild the ability to go out again, because she used to go out. So she had that ability. We're just rebuilding the ability so that she can go out again, go shopping, attend her appointments. And this is actually when we came up with a task after the session that she had to go to do grocery shopping with a list of 5 things. So we did the therapeutic memory reconsolidation. I did the hypnotic process, and then she went to buy stuff at Woolworths. And she gone once, and she's been there ever. She hasn't gone back anymore because she had that evidence straight away. I can actually go shopping, and it is within reason. It's safe to go out. Then session 3, letter I, inspire forgiveness. Now, what I used to do, I used to always educate about forgiveness. And then I used to talk about, okay, who are the people you want to forgive? Now, when we recall what I explained earlier, I do it differently now. I say to them, okay, so who do you want to forgive? Why do you want to forgive them? What emotions or feelings you have towards them? Because I want to light up that neural network. Now, I could be, and quite often, people put their parents in the room of forgiveness. And they're like, a lot of clients say, you know what, I really love my parents, but they trigger me, and all the things that happen, and they still trigger me when I talk to them on the phone. So I'm like, okay, tell me the last time they triggered you. The moment I get that, I open that window, and then I educate them about forgiveness. Now, when I say educate them about forgiveness, I mean giving them a different perspective about forgiveness. Because a lot of my clients have been sexually abused, have been raped, and they say, I can't or I don't want to forgive. And I don't blame them. And I'm not going to force them to forgive anything or anyone. But I just want them to look at a different way of it. And one way of changing the perspective could be saying to them, you know what? Let's not use the word forgiveness. Let's use letting go. Another way of doing that is to say to them, if you can't forgive the person, let's forgive the event. That's often a lot easier. Now, they come in with that belief. I am not going to forgive, I can't forgive, and I don't want to forgive. And suddenly they're like, if I look at it from that point of view, I might be able to let go. I might be able to forgive the event. That already creates that prediction error that suddenly, okay, I can do that. And then I take them through a hypnotic process. I always do self-forgiveness, including the people that they want to forgive, because I think self-forgiveness is usually, anyway, the most beautiful thing to witness. And then one way of linking it in at the end of the session is I get them to write a thank you letter to each of those people in the room of forgiveness. Now, they don't have to give that letter to those people. They don't tell anyone they have forgiven them. Because I'm not making it about the other person, but they write a thank you letter. And even if they can come up with one thing that they might be able to thank that person for, it gives them the empowerment. They're like, I'm choosing now what I'm taking out of the event. You're not disempowering me any longer. So that's one way of linking it in. And then session 4 is letter N, negative beliefs. So that's when I talk about the limiting beliefs. Now, I usually educate my clients about limiting beliefs at the end of session 3, because some of our clients have never heard about the concept. Some people don't know what a negative or limiting belief is. And one way of explaining it to them is I tell them, you know what, just monitor your self-talk. Monitor what you think to yourself or what you keep repeating to yourself, because that's usually how you can identify your limiting beliefs. So I really want them to become aware of those limiting beliefs, that by the time they come in for session 4, they're aware of them, and we can really work with them specifically. And maybe they say, okay, I've got no confidence. Okay, and then I say to them in the session, all right, well, tell me a specific time where that belief came up, where that belief stopped you from doing something, where that belief caused anxiety, or whatever it may be. Then I might educate them about beliefs. Again, it depends on what the client has told me. Because I might educate them and say, did you know that most of our beliefs weren't ours in the first place? Did you know that a lot of our beliefs are the views from our parents? And we've just copied them. And that's often like, oh, wow, it wasn't even my belief. Yeah, my mom always used to say that. That's often quite eye-opening to them. And sometimes also, depending on the situation, I might challenge their belief, because I already know a lot about them by that point. I might be like, okay, well, if you're not confident, how did you have a law degree? Or how did you have this? And then I look, I haven't even looked at confidence in that scenario. And then letter E, empowerment, that carries through each and every single session. So that's not a separate session, because I want my clients to be empowered, that no matter what challenge comes their way, they can deal with it in a resourceful way. So what I do is I teach my clients rapid reshape tools. Now, again, I felt like that was lacking when I was going through therapy. I felt like I was feeling better. I was coming home. 2 days later, I was getting triggered and I didn't know what to do. So I equip my clients with tools where they can stop any unwanted feeling, emotion, belief, whatever it may be. Now, the tools have two purposes. They also create that long-lasting change. So when we look at the rapid reshape tools, we can stop any thoughts, any negative behaviors, actions, or reactions. So what happens is when we are repeating something, a habitual behavior in the brain, what happens is the brain lights up that neural network. Now, when I'm putting up a roadblock and I'm interrupting what the brain has been doing and the brain can't light up that network, I'm forcing the brain to detour and the brain has to light up different regions. That's the purpose of the rapid reshape tool. So let's use it, Victoria, again. First session, I just taught her two simple tools. I taught her the bilateral stimulation and some tapping. Now, when we look at anxiety, anxiety is a learned habitual behavior. So a learned habitual behavior means neurons that are firing together over and over again. And every time they fire together, they get stuck together with a glue. And the more often they fire together and the stronger they're stuck together, the more it feels like it's happening automatic. The reason being, our brain is energy conserving. Our brain likes the least amount of effort and energy. So if it's something that's been always doing, it's very easy to just keep doing the same thing. Now, what happens though, if I'm putting up a roadblock and the brain can't go that way, that's when I can actually stop it. So let's say someone feels anxiety, feels a panic attack coming on, they're putting up that roadblock, the brain can't light up that, the brain has to go a different way, the brain has to do something. So then the brain goes a different way. And every single time the brain doesn't use that network of anxiety anymore, the glue gets weaker and weaker and weaker to the point where it might separate or just be so weak that the brain just doesn't choose to go that way anymore, because now the brain has a choice. Now, the opposite is true as well. If we don't do anything about it, and if that neural network lights up and it gets stronger, we're just making it stronger by not doing anything. And I tell my clients that. I tell my clients, if you don't use the tools and every single time you're not feeling anxious, think about it. You are reinforcing that network. And the reason why I tell them that, because I want them to use the tool, and it's the truth. I want them to understand that those tools have two purposes. Number one, it puts them in control in that moment. When a client is finally able to stop a panic attack in less than 30 to 50 seconds, I remember how that affected me. Suddenly I was like, wow, I couldn't believe it when I stopped the first panic attack that I had. That makes them feel so hopeful. So it puts them in control. And number two, it creates that long-lasting change. Now, the rapid reshape tools that I teach my clients, they take 30 seconds to a minute. They're very easy. I teach them a couple of tools each week because different situations require different tools. I'm not going to, bilateral stimulation might not be great when you're driving a car and you need two hands. And I also want to get all kinds of people. I want to get the visual people, auditory people, and kinesthetic people. So if I teach them a range of tools, they have a range of possibilities. And I want them to try it out. I want them to find out what works best for them and what resonates best with them. Now I want to explain something. So when we talk about the therapeutic memory reconsolidation and the tools that I just taught, I want to explain what the difference is. So with the therapeutic memory reconsolidation, we still have that same neural network, but we've overwritten it. We've changed it. When we do the rapid reshape tools, we are building a counter neuroplasticity. Now the difference is with a counter neuroplasticity, this old network is still there. So there's always a chance that the client might fall back into that old behavior. While with the therapeutic memory reconsolidation, it's overwritten. And this is why I like to use both. Because if I can create both, I have that, the success chance is so much higher with my clients. Now, the way I work with my clients, so I've created this Shine trauma release process in a hybrid program. So I have the one-on-one sessions with them. And then the second thing is they have access to an online part of the program. Now, in that online part of the program, there's educational videos. So I talk about trauma or anxiety or whatever it may be. All the tools that I'm teaching them, the step-by-step instructions are videos in there. They get a little weekly task to do, and the hypnosis recording is in there. So each week they get a new hypnosis recording. But as I said, they can listen to it at night as they go to sleep. So there's no excuse of not doing it. The tools take 30 to 50 seconds, and all my videos are really short because that's the first thing they come back with. Oh, but I didn't have time. Well, that way that no one can say they didn't have time. Now, the way I have it, it's like a drip function. So after 7 days, week 2 opens up. After 7 days, week 3 opens up. So they only get the resources from that 1 week. Now, with the hypnosis recording, most of my clients love it because we know what it solves. It solves sleep issues straight away because a lot of people have sleep issues, especially when you have anxiety or trauma. Now, they say to me, I sometimes only listen to you for 10 seconds, and that's fine. You know, I don't want them to sleep in a session, but with the recordings, I don't care. And if they sleep well, something they haven't done in years, it's amazing. So what I found, the advantages of having such an online support program is, first of all, they can be present in our session because I always tell them, you don't have to remember everything. You can rewatch the videos. Number 2, they feel that constant support in between the sessions because they can always log on, listen to a video, watch a video, do something. And it also gives them a game plan of what to do when they're being triggered, of what to do when they're feeling anxious. And it also gives them that game plan to actually achieve those tasks that we agree on. Because with Victoria, you know, she knew if she goes to Woolworths and she feels anxious, she just go in a corner and tap or whatever tool she chooses. So she had something that backed her up, that gave her the confidence that she can do it. Now, I think we all agree how important repetition and reinforcement is. And this is what that online part of the program creates. It creates the repetition and reinforcement to create that long-lasting change. And the other thing is, I am giving the clients the responsibility that they're fixing themselves. They need to use, and the intake call, I tell them that. I'm like, you have homework to do. But as I said, it's not time consuming. It's just you implementing it. And I can see if they watch the videos and use the tools. I had 1 or twice that a client lied to me and said, yeah, I've done everything and nothing has worked. And then I log on and they haven't even logged on. And I'm like, well, you're actually lying to yourself, not to me. And that's when I give them the accountability and the responsibility for their healing. Now, what I also do is I give them more tools than I have time in the session. So they get about 16, 17 rapid reshape tools. And there's anchoring, there's the bilateral stimulation, there's some tapping, there's some heart breathing, there's many different tools in there. First of all, I want them to find what they like most because what I like the most might not be what they like the most. And what happens is in the session, I don't have that much time that I can teach them every tool. I really want to do stuff in the session that they can't do themselves. So that's why I've put it all in the program so they can try it out. And sometimes a client comes to me and says, oh, that last tool was my favorite one. And I'm like, wow, no one ever said that to me. But it's actually what resonated most with them. And the other thing is the client gets lifetime access to the online part of the program. So they can go back anytime, rewatch the videos, listen to the recordings, and use those same tools. Because what happens is life will throw challenges at them. Now, what they can do is they can use those same tools to overcome those challenges. Or if they say, you know what, I've just overcome anxiety and now I want to do public speaking, they can use those same tools to overcome that. And I tell my clients that if you have any problems or wanna work on something else, go in there, use it, and if it doesn't work, of course, contact me and we can do 1 or 2 sessions. But I really want to give them that empowerment. And those tools that I'm teaching them, yes, they were the tools that helped me. That was back then when my daughter was a year old and I had daily panic attacks, to 2 years ago overcome the fear of public speaking, to now traveling the world and presenting. I'm using those same strategies. Now, what happened is I found with the hybrid approach that I was taking, it really just supercharged my clients' results. Their results got better. And what it also does is it enhances the value of my service. So I wasn't raising my price and not giving them anything. Yes, I did raise my price, but I gave them all of that gold. And I felt good about it because I'm like, I'm giving them something. I'm not just raising a price, how you often hear as advice, raise your prices. Now I have everything in one app. But when I started out and I didn't have the finances to have an app, what I did is I just had it on a Google Drive. And I sent them weekly the emails with the links to the videos from that week. I had it set up as templates, and I would send out week 1, and then after session 2, I would send out week 2. Same thing. No client ever said, oh, you don't have a fancy app. But when we work with teens, I know they love apps. And I give my teens clients a similar approach. And they love using those tools. They love having those recordings on their phone. So you can even do it with limited budget. What's my time? I'm out? I'm out, okay. Well, if anybody has any questions, I'm obviously staying back, sorry. Sorry. Well, if anyone does have any questions, I'm there and I'd love to answer anything you want to know. And I hope you got a lot out of this presentation.